As a mom, you know your home is where your family learns to love. It's the place for your little kids to learn who they are, and it's where your bigger kids remember who they were. It's where dreams come to life. Your home deserves a spotlight, and Everlights can help make it happen. Everlights is your permanent external lighting expert. Turn your home into a princess castle, a Halloween spook house, or a winter wonderland. You'll be the hero of your home. Let's give your home some color with Everlights. Click the banner for a free quote.
The Gabby Petito case. There was a traffic stop on August the 12th. My question to you is, did the cops blow it on that traffic stop? We're going to discuss that traffic stop and a whole lot more right here on today's Charlie Crimebuster. Well, we want to welcome you to this particular special edition of Charlie Crimebuster. We're going to be talking about, the case that everybody's talking about today, and that's Gabby Petito. Unfortunately, sadly, it appears that her body has been found in that search for her body there in the Teton National Park. But prior to that, there was a traffic stop, and we're going to be talking about that traffic stop. Did the cops blow it there? Was there something else that could have been done? Now, you and I both know it's very easy to do Monday morning quarterbacking, particularly when something like this has gone down. But we are going to discuss the traffic stop, and we're going to talk about what could have happened, what did happen, and maybe what should have happened. Well, we're going to do all that on today's program. Now, this is not going to be the kind of program that we usually do, where we always share with you the crazy crook story, and we will let you know about the courageous hero, civilian hero of the day, or even law enforcement hero of the day. But we're going to get right into this case that's blowing up media right now. As you probably already know, her boyfriend is in the wind. We don't know where he is. He is missing. And police are looking for him as a quote-unquote person of interest. And in order to really understand it, we kind of got to go back and look at the timeline of how all this happened in the first place. And we're going to be talking about that timeline, and then we're going to move into that traffic stop and talk to you from a cop's perspective about could there have been more done during that traffic stop that just might have averted this tragedy. As I've said, we need to know a little bit about the timeline. Let's go back to July the 2nd in 2020. This was exactly when Gabby actually got engaged to Brian. And they talked about that. In fact, they announced her engagement on Instagram. Now, on December the 11th, 2020, that's when they purchased the van. There was a white van that they got together and purchased. It was actually Gabby's van, and they retrofitted that so that they could use it as a camper going on their trip. And then on July the 2nd, 2021, about 1 year from their engagement, they decided to take that trip. They had been in Blue Point, New York. That's where Gabby was originally from, and they were there to celebrate her younger brother's graduation from high school. Now, they departed from New York on July the 2nd, and this was on a planned 4-month cross-country journey. Now, according to the family attorney, they had gotten engaged, but they postponed their wedding plans because of coronavirus, and they decided to take this trip instead. Now, there was some controversy about that because the mother has been reported as saying that one of the reasons why they put off their engagement is that they thought that they were too young. Now, this could be a red flag. It could mean that there was maybe some problems in paradise, and maybe things weren't going as good as they thought. But nonetheless, instead of getting married, they put off the marriage, and they decided to take a 4-month trip. Now, they were driving this white 2012 Ford Transit van, and they had converted the interior to allow them to camp, cook meals inside as they traveled. And according to their social media posts, the pair first traveled from Florida to Kansas and to Colorado, then to Utah, and they were touring and camping at several of the national parks and the natural attractions. Now, we can follow their journey pretty well from her Instagram account. According to the timeline from Instagram, the couple stopped at several locations. On July the 4th, they were at Monument Rock in Kansas. On July the 8th, they were in Colorado Springs in Colorado. On July the 10th, they were at the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, again there in Colorado. On July the 16th, they were in Utah, and they were at the Zion National Park. On July the 21st, they were at Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah. And on July the 26th, they were at the Mystic Hot Springs in Utah. And on July the 29th, they were at the Canyonlands National Park in Utah. And on August the 12th, that's the day of the traffic stop, there they were at Arches National Park in Utah. Now, I say they were at Arches National Park in Utah. Actually, they weren't quite there when they had the traffic stop, because there was an altercation there in Moab City, Utah. You see, the police there had an encounter with both of them, and they were described as having, quote, engaged in some sort of altercation. That was according to a report released by the Moab City Police Department. Now, the officers were called to reports of disorderly conduct, and they did encounter Laundrie and Petito. And there was also a witness whose full name was redacted from the report. His first name was Chris. Now, Laundrie and Petito are described as having gotten into some sort of physical fight. This was following an argument. Both the male and the female, and this is from the report itself, reported that they are in love and engaged to be married and desperately didn't wish to see anyone charged with a crime. Again, that's according to the report, and this is from Officer Eric Pratt. Now, police later, they did release body camera footage of these encounter with these people, and during that time, you could see that Gappy was emotional, and she was crying throughout much of the video. Now, Laundrie says that the couple got into a minor scuffle, that it really took place when he had gotten into the van and he had dirty feet. And Gabby admits that she slapped Laundrie when she thought that he was going to leave her in Moab. Now, the couple also states that Laundrie did not hit Petito. Now, Laundrie, he did have visible scratches on his arms and face and neck, and the police did take photos of those injuries. And they almost arrested her. But since both parties said they were in love and didn't want charges pressed, well, the couple agreed to separate for the night. And of course, Laundrie was put up in a hotel by a domestic assault outreach group. Now, I've seen this video in its entirety, and you can see it. It's online. It actually is a very, very long traffic stop, over an hour and 17 minutes, I think. And there were 3 officers there during that time. And a lot of things were going down. And so we're going to talk about that particular traffic stop, because we know that afterwards we can track both these young people for a number of days, but then it just goes black. You don't hear from Gabby anymore. So let's talk about the traffic stop, and then we'll talk about what happened afterwards. There was an altercation at a natural food store, and that was called in on 911. The description of the van was given. It was a white van, had Florida tags, had a ladder on the back of it, and one officer, Officer Robbins, happened to spot this vehicle. He was speeding up to catch up with the vehicle, and the vehicle was just about to enter the national park there that we mentioned a moment ago, the Arches National Park. When he came up on that vehicle, he noticed a couple of things. Number one, it was speeding. It was doing like 40-something in a 15-mile-per-hour speed zone. They're getting ready to the entrance of the park there. And number two, there was erratic driving. And as he was getting ready to put on the lights and make the pull, he noticed that even then, the van had crossed the double line. And when he put on the lights, it actually swerved over and hit the curb. So there's all the probable cause in the world to make a traffic stop, even beyond the earlier 911 call. So Officer Robbins, he makes the traffic stop. He goes up on the passenger side of this van. And from there, here are some of the things that took place. Let me start by saying that Officer Robbins was extremely professional throughout this entire traffic stop. In fact, all the law enforcement officers that were there, I believe there was a supervisor there was another park ranger there, and maybe another park ranger along with him, and then there was the Officer Robbins, who was the initial officer in the traffic stop. He was extremely professional. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody treated any nicer than these folks were by these police officers. He noticed that when he got to the passenger side that Gabby was very, very upset, that she was crying. He was trying to ask what was going on, and he realized that both of them were talking, so he did what any officer usually would do in a situation like that. He would separate the two. He asked her to go back and take a seat in the back of his cruiser, which she did. And then now he has them separated, and before she gets to take a seat, though, he talks to her as she's outside of the vehicle. He had asked her to exit the vehicle first, and he was saying what's going on. Well, she began to proceed to say that, well, they were just having a tough time, that she was very emotional, that she had some mental anxiety problems, this sort of thing, and she was just trying to apologize to him for how mean she had been to him, and so on, and she was basically taking all the fault of their altercation on herself, which I may say, my friend, is not an unusual thing for a female in a domestic situation to take blame, even though she's not all at fault. On the other hand, when he's talking to Brian, we see a different thing altogether. He's not trying to take blame. If you see anything, he's trying to shift blame over to her. And so she begins to talk about this, and then he asked her to take a seat in the back of the cruiser. He goes up and talks to Brian, and then Brian now is exiting the vehicle, and other officers are there, and they're talking to him. And they notice that there are scratches upon his neck, and I think maybe a scratch on his arm. Anyway, there's scratches on him. So here we have a visible report of what appears to be the results of a domestic. They keep talking about what happened when the vehicle went on the curb. He said that she grabbed the steering wheel. She said that she grabbed his arm, whichever way that was involved in the altercation. And so here is certainly probable cause, not only for the stop, but there's a reasonable suspicion here that there is a domestic assault in progress, because she did scratch him. She said she did hit him. Now, when there is the sign of an assault, according to Utah law and most laws in most states, then you can go ahead and make a charge. And at first, it seems that Officer Robbins, in this entire situation, was in his mind going to go ahead and make the charge against Miss Petito for a domestic assault. That was going to be a misdemeanor, but nonetheless, if he had done this, there are several things that would have taken place. Number one, they would have had to separate. He would have either written her a citation or arrested her, either one. And then there would be what you might call a ex parte, some people, you would call it a restraining order. It could be order of protection, but in Utah, there was an order of protection that would immediately take place, and they would not be able to have contact with each other until one, or at least whoever the victim is, comes in and waives that contact order. It may or may not involve a court situation at that time, and there may be a court follow-up. In other words, there would have been a lot more things going on in their lives had he decided to go ahead and charge her with this misdemeanor domestic assault. Well, as they begin to talk and they begin to gather more information, you can see that he's being much larger than her, and they didn't really think that she was going to cause him any bodily harm. And they recognize the fact that if they were to make the charge, that would have gone on their record. So these guys, being very nice officers, nice cops, and looking at the totality of the situation, they determined that there was not any intent for her to harm him when she struck him. And he was very careful to emphasize, now, you've got to be careful how you answer this. Did you really intend to do harm? Well, that was a good way to get around that law, and it was a good way for him to be able to say, okay, we do not need now to officially charge you with any kind of crime in this situation. But he did take steps to make sure that there was some time to de-escalate this situation. He asked them to allow him to separate them. They gave her the van back, and they arranged some kind of hotel accommodations for Brian through some sort of program that was available there for them. So he did ask them to stay apart from each other for the entire night. They each had their cell phones. They could have contacted each other, and of course they had their cell phones for emergency situations. But that's kind of the way that he handled it. So the question is, did he handle it right? The question is, should they have been tougher charges given in that situation? And let me be the first to tell you, it's very, very easy, my friend, to do what we call Monday morning quarterbacking. It's very easy for you to say, well, I would have done this and I would have done that, but you were not there at the time. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce something else to you that had the officers known this, well, if they'd known this, might have been some other things happening as well. Now, what the officers were not privy to was the 911 tape that started this entire situation. You see, Brian and Gabby had been in front of this natural food store, and they had gotten into an altercation. There was one witness by the name of Chris that they interviewed later, but there's another person who actually made a 911 call. And while Chris, who was interviewed, said that he thought that Gabby was the instigator of all this, the 911 caller says entirely something different. And here's a listen to that 911 call.
County Sheriff's Office. Were you able to get a description of the investigation? Hi, can you hear me, sir? Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute. Florida with the white van, Florida license plate, white van, gentleman. Where's it at? 5-6 Deer. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street. They made a right onto Main Street from Moonflower. Or what were they doing? Cooperative, but what'd you say? What were they doing? We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl. He was slapping her? Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Now, from that call, you can see that that's a whole lot different situation from what they had come to conclusion with the traffic stop. This caller says that Brian was the aggressive person. This caller says that he hit her, that he struck her. And I am confident, had the officers had that information in mind, it might have gone a little differently. They may have gone ahead and at least made some sort of charge or had handled the investigation differently. But this is after the fact. So now we have to determine, did they make the right call? And again, it's very easy to Monday morning quarterback these kind of things. And here's something I want to point out to you folks. One of the things that we want to do here at Charlie Crimebuster is to let you know that these men and women who put on the badge, they have a ton of responsibility on them. And they have to make choices with the information that they have. And on top of that, sometimes they have to make split-second choices. Now, in this situation, they were there for an hour and 17 minutes. They even offered them water and this type of thing, and they were extremely cordial to this couple. But sometimes you don't have all that time because you got all kinds of other calls you got to respond to. But the bottom line is this. It is my opinion that they did make the right call. Based on the information that they had, they didn't want this young lady to have some sort of criminal record on her life. They didn't want that to be able to destroy her life or to cause her hardships in her life. And they felt that if these two would separate and have some time to cool down, that things would go well. And on top of that, even if they had charged her, and they did put that order of protection, then the next day, Brian could have gone down and waived. He was the victim. He could have waived that order of protection, and they could have gone on anyhow. The only thing I don't know is they may have had to come back for a court hearing or something like that, and it may have been one more step in this thing that may have caused them to think more things about it. But nonetheless, it is my opinion that this officer, he acted upon good faith of the information that he had. I think he made the right choice. Brian was the victim according to the information that he had. And Brian did not want to press charges. And it wasn't really in their mind that Brian would be in danger because he was a lot bigger, stronger than she was. And she didn't seem to be that type of a violent person. It just seemed to be someone who was having a mental episode, anxiety and tension, and they'd been living together, and it seemed to be reasonable to think that this was just something that would happen that would not escalate into something even more terrible, which unfortunately it did. So based on the information that he had, I don't have any qualms with the way he handled it. I think he handled it as a professional. And I know that probably if you were to talk to him today, he's probably second guessing this thing and thinking, what if I could have done this and what if I could have done that? But based on the information he had, I think he made the right choice at the right time. Now, let me say this. There are some red flags in here about domestic violence, though. And it's not just in this traffic stop, and it's not just in the 911 caller. There are other things that have now come to surface to realize that this was a situation where there was a lot of tension. This was a situation that had red flags that says there could be something more serious happening in the lives of these two young people. And if you are listening today and you are in a situation where somebody is trying to be controlling over you, whether somebody gets extremely jealous, these are all red flags for you to look at. If somebody does get violent with you, if somebody does slap you, if somebody does hit you, then my friend, I want you to know that you need to get help. You need to make some decisions because your life may depend on it. And I want to give you the domestic abuse hotline. It is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. If you are in any kind of relationship where there's the possibility of abuse, or you think that the person you're with is becoming abusive to you, this is a hotline for you to talk to experts who can help you navigate the waters that you're navigating. That's 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. And I want to encourage you to get help. So getting back to the bottom line with the traffic stop, it did certainly show that there was problems with this couple. While I know that there could have been some other things that could have taken place in the traffic stop at the discretion of these officers, I believe they handled it professionally based on the information that they had. Now, we're going to get more into this case because it is a doozy. It's sad to say that this young lady lost her life in this particular relationship. And it's disappointing that the boyfriend is now in the win as of the recording of this particular podcast. But we're going to talk about some underlying things that was happening with them that now has been revealed. Some red flags for domestic violence. We'll be doing that in our next edition of Charlie Crimebuster. Right now, this is a special edition of Charlie Crimebuster, and we've discussed the traffic stop. The traffic stop of Gabby and Brian that happened on August the 12th, prior to her losing her life in that national park where she was found, if that is indeed where she was killed or where she lost her life. We're still waiting for results right now from the autopsy. Till this time, next time, this is Donnie Cantwell, a.k.a. Charlie Crimebuster, and we're encouraging you to be safe, to be alert, for indeed the life you save may be your very own.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.